wish I could tell you, I wish I could implore the view on my side as a dad. And it's kind of like this. If I'm trying to explain to you like this magnificent roller coaster I've been on, unless you've been on it, you're like, yeah, that sounds pretty cool. I'm getting to experience with my son, who's 25, his life, like his friends, his life, where he's at. And so this episode is about we talked about this topic of boys to men. Like this, he was a young boy and he's a man now, and one of his best friends that I've known since Albert's known him since he was like 9 years old is getting married in a couple of weeks. Adam. And so it just got to me, it really just hit me like, wow, I can't believe that fast. Matter of fact, Albert came up to Sacramento on Thursday, and I had breakfast with his mom, her husband, myself, and Albert, and we just it was like the first time that I really got to just sit with my ex-wife, his mom, and her husband, and just kind of absorb where my son is at. And
Mhm.
so I just thought this would be a great opportunity for Albert to share a little bit about it because I'm just curious, um, where he's at in life. His best friend's getting married. And so, yeah, I'll open up to you, bro. Like whatever comes to mind. No questions yet, but like just as I'm talking through that, I'm just kind of curious at what you're feeling and what you're thinking about.
Well, yeah, like you said, this it's kind of getting to the realization now that we're getting older. We're in our mid-20s now. I grew up with him. We dormed together. We've experienced this whole beginning early adulthood together, and then now we're in this next phase of our life where we really get to build relationships not only with each other, with friends, and then I've had multiple girlfriends during this time frame too. So like just seeing that transformation and then his progression from when we were in high school, just being rowdy, having fun, and just, doing our thing, right? Because since we grew up in a small town, we can kind of get away with it, whatever we wanted to. And so the wedding is just around the bend, and so now it's like, okay, it's hitting us. It's hitting us all because it's real. It's right there. I'm prepping my speech, for him as well. And so I know he got a little emotional during this past weekend when we went to our bachelor party, and like it's just like it's just a really big step because like it's every man's, even as like for a woman, it's a man's dream too to get married and won't find that person that you can just be open with, and that's special because not many times and not many people we can be really open with, and so for me, it was just like, wow, like that's really cool to witness and be like, okay, like you can find someone. There is someone for you out there. And yeah, it was just really cool just to be around and we partied, we had fun, and now it's time to like just do the ceremony. Like they've been living together for a while, so it's like they already are married, but there's just the logistical stuff. Like once you actually turn over that stone, you can't go back, right? It's just different.
Well, it brought me back to, when I got married. I got married, I was 25 as well. But my circumstance was different though. Like I was already a dad. Alyssa was already born. She was almost two and a half. And when your mom and I met, I'll tell you this that we're on here. Like, I knew I was going to marry her, bro.
Mm.
Like, it was interesting when I met her at Sac State. She was just different.
Mhm.
Like, she had her shit together. She knew where she was going. Um, and she just was different. And she's been the only woman that I've ever asked to marry, and I'm actually proud of that. I'm proud to say that I didn't monkey branch from marriage to marriage, and marriage is and was very important to me. And I just remember though, out of my group of friends, I was the only one. I was the first one to get married.
Mhm.
Like none of them were even planning to get married. Pat was my best friend. Pat was engaged, and then she ended up breaking it off. But I was the first one to really start a family. And so I know for me, there was this euphoria of like, wow, I'm doing this. But I was scared as shit because I had nobody guiding me. There's nobody guiding me. Like my friends were in my place, but we were different. We met in high school and I met a couple of guys when I was out of high school. So we were friends, But what I admire about you guys, like I literally have known each of your friends since they were before puberty. Like they were little boys. Coached Adam in basketball a couple times. You know, all your boys, I've known each other. We've all, I've coached them at one point in time. And so yeah, it's just really cool to see you flourish. And I'm just kind of curious about you. Like, so as you're looking at your friend Adam, you know, do you have any, is there anything about you that feels like this imposter syndrome, like you should be doing more, or do you feel like you're secure enough to where you're exactly where you're at, or do you find yourself comparing? I'm just kind of curious at what you're going through right now mentally.
For me, not necessarily because I've already established like where I see my future with certain people, right? I'm established in that point. I think the biggest imposter syndrome, if there is like I guess professionally, we're on different paths. That's the only thing that I usually look at with my peers is like, okay, we're on different paths because they're more typically on the corporate ladder versus I'm more independent, self-employed, creating my own business. So that's the biggest thing for me. But in terms of like love life and stuff like that, no, I think if it were to be later, I would definitely question some things. But part of this process with me too is realizing that I'm not really concerned about what other people are doing. I'm just focused on what I'm doing, and I want to be there to support my friends and feel it more in that direction. For me, it's like it's cool. I know at times like if there's like a transition period from like one person to the next, I've noticed myself that I've been like, um, am I going to find something like that? There'll be some questions of like, when is this going to happen? But I've noticed once I've kind of let go of that like little bit of seed of doubt, something pops up to where either I can check myself again and be like, no, dude, you're good. And then there's another thing too, where when you stop like hyper focusing on that, you will end up finding it anyways and attracting. There's just like weird symbiosis that happens when you aren't so hyper focused on finding the thing that you want. It'll actually come to you when you just are just doing what you are already. So for me, it's just more of just cool just to witness and see because it's out there. It feels like a fairy tale. Um, but if he can find it, I know anyone can too.
So I'm curious on that. What does that mean? It feels like a fairy tale. What felt like a fairy tale?
I think just like how easy it was for them to kind of like, and that's from an outside perspective too. I know some of the ins and outs of some of their stuff, but like any relationship and any persona, you don't really know. So for me, it was more so like, how do you see the small little parts of what he shared with me and what they've shared with me, and then how do I find that in that as well? It's their first I know for him it's at least his first real relationship.
Yeah.
And so there's something in that that's powerful too, where it's like, okay, you didn't have to go through the dating pool multiple times. You don't have to do this and that. So I think that's where I'm talking about, where it's like, it feels like that is being talked about. But I know there's also other work they've had to get there, which is one of the reasons why we're doing this is because like, how do we build the confidence to go to our significant other and do that as well?
Yeah. What's one thing you learned about Adam in this phase of his life, on how he's handled his relationship and to make that step to get married?
I know they've done some personal, I don't know how much you want to share. So I know they've done some like personal conversations that have um that they've talked about. And so I think for me is more so I just learned that he was able to just address those issues sooner than later. Um and that's something that I like to do with my relationships is to just like confront them as soon as possible now because or confront them myself or confront them with a person
Yeah.
because it's sooner or later at the grander scale, it's going to come up in one form or another. So I think what I've like asked, I've literally asked them both directly, like, what do they do when they feel like they don't know how to confront each other? And so they've expressed like how they've had to go to like certain mentors, they've had to go like they've gone into the church. So that's been one way that they've been able to express themselves and honestly also making sure that they spend time not only together, but also give their time for other people and themselves because it's a long life
Yeah.
to just spend it with each other. And so you have to make sure you have stuff that you want,
Yeah.
or else you're going to feel like you're not yourself throughout this process.
Is there one thing that you have say it another way, that you learned from Adam that you're like, huh? Because I think you guys are kind of similar. Like I don't know him that well, but there's something that you see in him that's grounded. You're like, huh? Like that's really cool that he adapted to that, or I can find myself doing that, or if you guys got talked intimately about stuff, you don't have to tell us details, but did it help you kind of shape your way of thinking about relationships and potential marriage down the road?
I think just knowing when to pick your battles, I think is what I learned from him is like his ability to be pretty agreeable and then also learn to express his opinion when it's necessary. That's something that I'd say we're pretty similar at because we're both pretty agreeable people in general, except for in particular instances. So I think just like knowing when to pick those battles and not be afraid of the consequence because it's gonna just like snowball over time. And so how I've implemented that into like other relationships and other people I've interacted with is just if I really need the space, like ask for it. And also like if it's something I know it's gonna be swept under the rug, but might come up later, just pull the rug and we can deal with the consequences later. So I think that's one of the biggest things because I've asked him like a handful of times, like, what do you do when like X, Y, and Z happens with your significant other? Like how do you deal with that? Because if you try to do I think what I'm really good at is like doing things on my own a little bit too often instead of just asking for help. And that's caused longer rifts in the long run when you could have just asked the question, you know?
Yeah, I look back, one of the things I admire about your generation is you guys are learning a lot that your parents didn't do.
Right.
I think the biggest thing that if I look back with your mom and I are what we I know what I failed to learn how to do, and part of it was my wounding is I really didn't know how to communicate to her. Like her and I really never learned how to, I would say, respect each other's needs. I'll say it that way. We never learned how to agree to disagree or to agree to agree. We learned how to fight by arguing because unfortunately that's how our parents. Now I'm not putting it on our parents, but we never learned how to cope with our styles of overcoming something that was minor. But because of my wounding, I think the biggest thing that I had to look at myself is I was so immature. I wasn't a man, bro. Like I wasn't a man to some extent because I didn't know we talk about this, deal with my feelings. I would take things so personal. But that was my wounding because I never learned as a kid how to not take it personal.
Mhm.
Because I was suppressed and I was always put down to where my feelings didn't matter. So when I became an adult, I just learned how to express it, but in a vulgar and meaningless and putting it like I didn't know how to communicate. And so what I admire about your generation, like pretty much everybody on this call is at your age group or give or take a few 5 years, is your ability as a generation to really see your parents and you're adapting differently. Like you guys really want to communicate and you really want you have this awareness. What do you from what you remember, really to go in a rabbit hole, but what do you remember about your mom and I relationship when we were married? Was it a lot of memories of fighting or what are some things? I'm just kind of curious about what you thought about how we conducted ourselves in front of you guys.
I mean, I don't really remember the beginning portion. I know as a family unit, the communication was more so like we need to be a family and like come together. So I remember it was you definitely implemented that we need to have dinners, I think
Yeah.
almost weekly as long as we didn't have like practice, especially in the early years, like when it wasn't competitive, we had more flexibility to have dinner at the table.
Yes.
That was huge. I remember like TV was always off except for at the end, maybe 10 times ever. Like that
Yeah.
was definitely a huge one.
Yeah.
Um, I think just also making sure that we spent like a couple weekends together as well too. And so that was a big proponent in the family dynamic.
The
In
balance.
terms of the relationship portion, I mean, I wouldn't really remember the early portions until
Yeah.
middle school, high school when it was a lot of arguing. So I think for me, that's what I noticed that you guys, that's how you guys communicated, like on a more extreme level. There'd be sometimes when you guys would just, talk about it more cordially, but so at the end, it's hard for me not to say that that's one of the primary things that I learned.
Yeah.
And I was already someone that wasn't very confrontational, so I knew that that wasn't gonna be my style.
Yeah.
I know sometimes it can be now.
Yeah.
I'm more open in expressing my opinion and just being blunt about it, and that's where I've learned now is not just be too direct, but actually, like, build up more context in a situation, so that way it's not just going straight to the point, but allowing the person to understand more on what's happening. Because that's what I've noticed too with our generation is we want more communication. It's just now we back off in any sort of confrontation, you know? So it's like, how do you do the push and pull of a relationship? I think is what our generation's gonna
Yeah.
mostly have problems with, is when something does get in the way, like, can you just break through or go around to find another way and not just run back when something happens?
One of the things I really looked forward to when I got married, like I remember looking forward to, I would say, in a very, very remedial way of your mom and I, we get to do it our way. Like we get to
Right.
develop our values. Her and I had a lot of things in common, and a lot of things we didn't have in common. That's where our frustration came, is that we didn't know how to commingle the things we didn't have in common. We didn't know how to appreciate each other for our differences. And so I remember really like, wow, we get an opportunity to instill our values. And what's interesting is, like, again, what I loved about your mom is like we had a lot in common about our upbringing, and so we knew we.
But
Oh, I lose you.
but
I lost you. Hold on a second here.
shit.
Hold on one second. I missed him. Try this again. All right, hang tight. Mickey's coming in here. Give me 1 second
Not
here.
bad.
Here we go.
Cool. Sorry about that.
Okay. I was saying that what I remember the most about when we started a family, especially when you came into the world for us, there was something tangible now that we're like, this is ours and this is our bubble and this is what we get to do. And that's when her and I would spend a lot of time with you, like stay up late with you, and we would eat.
Mhm.
We ate at the table with you, even when you were in a high chair. And so when Alyssa would come on the weekends, she was a she wasn't a part of the family, but she was part of the routine. Okay.
Right.
Then when Kaylee was born, we really just had this really cool way of living. Like we wanted to live a certain way. We wanted to have dinner. We wanted to have discussion. We wanted to have presence. We wanted to have this unique structure and unity that we knew at some point in time because we didn't have it. So as we instilled it, what I love, even towards the end of the marriage, is those values were still in play. More so for her because you were in the home with her still. But that's what I appreciate the most is like those values were still there. And
Mhm.
I miss that the most. What I miss the most, honestly, bro, is I miss family dinners.
Right.
I miss being around the table and just catching up and just being there because that was like the only time that we could connect. So for everybody out there watching this, like I'm telling you, from being a dad, from a daddy to a dad to a grandfather, is your kids grow up so fast. You only really have about 8 full years from 0 to maybe 9 years old when you're not all over the place. And so my wish and my hope is like is really do spend that dinner with the TV
Mhm.
and really do ask questions and be interested in your kids and really do whether they want it or not. Like trust me, my kids have told me like some of the best memories they've had are that, and just this value structure of just coming home and making sure that they did their homework before they went outside, or the way their mom would like make them lunch and or give them snacks and talk to them and just be a part of their life. Like we have to be a part of our kids' lives. And when we do that, that just creates an intimacy that you can't even express.
Yeah, that I definitely miss those too. Like, I think excuse me, even just going into college now, like, that's one of the things I definitely miss and outside of the family is having those family dinners because you don't you don't really realize it until you're gone, and when you grow up, like it gets just lonely. Like sometimes, like it's just quiet. I remember, even just like after the holidays, like when you have so much family time, and then just like the the constant like noise interaction with people, and then coming. I remember coming home this year, and I was like, oh shoot, like it's quiet, and like going from like 100 to 0 real quick. You don't realize it, and so it's like okay, like even just like a 20-minute dinner, would just be nice. And so that's something I'm looking forward to doing, like with my family too, is like making sure to actually spend that quality time. Just because you don't know where it's going to happen again, like it gets old pretty fast, just like doing the same thing over and over again. So I think something that I would like to know even more forward is like kind of branching the bachelor life to like the marriage life. Like what is like you mentioned this the lifestyle of the differences between like the bachelor life versus like marriage, but is there really a difference for those people who haven't been married from like girlfriend, boyfriend to engagement to married? Like let's say you living with your girlfriend right now and boyfriend, right? Like what's the difference from like ring to no ring? Is there like that the mentality that goes behind it, the actual physicalness of it, like all that?
So great question. So the answer is yeah. Like I can't explain. I've talked to hundreds of people, by the way, who've been in from bachelor to boyfriend, girlfriend to engagement to living in to getting married. Something shifts from when the time you actually are not married to married. Something shifts. Now, between a bachelor and then relationships and boyfriend, girlfriend, here's where I think that really shifts. I think people are gonna get mad at me here, right? So kind of trigger, I'm gonna get trigger you. Is that some people want to get married, but they don't want to be a wife.
Mm,
Some people want to get married, but they don't want to be a husband.
mm,
And what I mean by that is when you get the marriage, for whatever reason, is a ceremony that everybody's looking forward to, thinking that that's the end. No, no, no. It's literally just a ceremony. When you go home and everything settles, what changes is are you a wife and a husband, or are you still boyfriend and girlfriend, one foot in and one foot out? I think that's the biggest shift that happens is some people never make that adjustment. Because if you're all in as being a husband, there's certain characteristics. One thing I think a lot of women don't understand with men, we love differently than you as women. Women, you can love a lot of little things. Men, when they love, here's a big thing. Picture there being a line right here, okay? This line right here is when I say that I love you till death do us part, it literally means death to us part, meaning I'm willing to risk my life for you now. As a man, it's way different than women. So if
mm,
I'm telling you I'm willing to risk my life for you and you're not happy and you want to leave, this is where a lot of it gets messed up.
mm,
Is marriage literally? Now I'm telling you from my experience because I did it wrong. Like I honestly, I loved your mom. I got married for all the wrong reasons. I'm
mm,
being really real about this. I didn't understand the role of a man when I married your mom. I really didn't. I just thought it was the next phase in our relationships. And I think a lot of people think that it's just the next phase. I will tell you, I guarantee you, if you surveyed people my age, 40 to 55, every single one of them would say, 99.9% would say it was the next thing that we needed to do.
mm.
And I think that's where people get in trouble is it's the next thing that you need to do, but not understanding that there's now a responsibility and a role as a wife and a husband, not a boyfriend and girlfriend. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it sounds like it might be the next like ritualistic part or ceremonial part, but it's not really the next step. It could be like, are you making sure that the foundation is there. So maybe it's replastering like the building, making sure it's all good. So that means it could be like couples therapy, it could be like just having conversations that are needed that you're just sweeping under the rug. It could be making sure like, is this what we really want? You know, like right before. I mean, that's what engagement is supposed to be, right? Is to, yes, I'm ready to commit. Now let's make sure everything is stable rather than just rushing into that next step of getting the ring and like now it's a legally binding document too. So there's all that other shenanigans too that goes on. So to me, that makes a lot of sense of like it's not necessarily the next step. It's more so like what are we actually doing? What does being husband and wife mean to each person?
And I think that's where I'm going to tell you, your mom and I, we never talked about that. We never talked about what it meant to be married, bro. Honestly, we never. It was just so the challenge I think a lot of people get into is the assumption part. I'm assuming that we're going to do this.
Mhm.
I will tell you, bar none, there's lots of couples I've talked to where the man will say, "Man, that's not the woman that I married. She loved baseball. She loved going on hikes. She loved doing this." And you know what the woman would say? "I thought he was going to change where he was going to grow up and not need that anymore." Two different perspectives. See what I'm saying? Is both came together because of commonalities, but one's thinking that they're going to grow out of it, and the other's like, "I married you because of it." That's how fucked up this is, dude. So that's what I'm being real. Like these little conversations, I had no idea. I had zero, honestly, like zero clue because no one talked to me about this. And I'm not blaming anybody. I just had no idea. And quite frankly, your mom didn't either. And I think that's why where I'm at in life, maybe I am being picky. Maybe I am being my standards are higher. Maybe my I am being more abrasive at times because I did it wrong for so many years that I know what I want now. I know what I don't want. I know what I've been through. I don't want to go through that. So I will tell you, I think some of my, I would say, um, repelling of women right now is I'm too honest about things.
Mm,
I'm
yeah.
too blunt about things. And so now you're talking about this woke. I'm the other side. I'm the good woke, not the bad woke. This woke 52-year-old who is very, very, I would say, confident, is very, very masculine, is very knows what he wants. I think in the modern day woman, there's a lot of repelling because I am different. If they would have met me 20 years ago, I would have been the ideal guy because I would have been more, I guess, appealing, acceptable. I'm not saying I'm less acceptable. I've been married and I understand for me what marriage means now, and I think I'm more committed because of all the failures that I've had to understand this man at 52 giving you direction about what marriage is to me and what it isn't. Is I'm just in a different place now of understanding what marriage really is.
Yeah, and it's you also mentioned too about like bringing your values together with like mom, right? And so like that's also another factor too that hops into this little concoction of marriage, right? Is like there's two different value sets and bring them together, you know, and that can go anywhere from just like what does it mean to be a husband and wife to this is how I like to do certain things in the household and then also the moral values too. So like with if I may asking like how do you bring what you grew up with, what you've learned over time in adulthood values, and how do you bring those two different sets of value points together without overstepping each other's toes and making sure that you set your own boundaries too?
Yeah, I think what happens is what I've learned is I'll give you something really simple, right? Is the triggers. Triggers will come up in your relationship, and the triggers are the woundings that you have. I'm gonna give you
Mhm.
an example. One of my biggest trigger and pet peeves has always been about dishes. Okay, is why the fuck are you not putting your dishes away, right? Because I use that as a framework. It doesn't bother me anymore. But up until 4 years ago, it bothered me because the value system placed on me as a kid was if you don't put your dishes away, it's a form of disrespect, and now you're going to get reprimanded. So this belief system was pushed on me that then I reinforced as a teenager, as an adult, as a roommate. And so that's my value system. Now I'm marrying someone who doesn't see that, and now we're getting an argument over a cup. It's not the cup, it's a belief system that I have. So what I think I could have done, I'll share a story with you. One of the biggest fights your mom and I ever got into, okay? We live in an apartment, and I really never cleaned up. I cleaned up here and there, but I cleaned up like a man, like water all over the place, dishes, and we lived in this apartment when you were born. And it was apartment, and maybe the SMUD bill was like $29 a month, right? Nothing. And when she complained one time, she goes, "Hey, do you mind just when I get home doing dishes?" Cool, no problem. What this meant was I cleaned up all my dishes and I put it in the dishwasher. And I started dishwashing. She comes home from school because she was in school. And I'm chilling, and she comes in, and the first thing she says was, "Why is there water all over the place? Why start the dishwasher?" I'm thinking I did something good. She's like, "Albert, the dishwasher's half full. Why are you starting it?" And I'm like, "Wait, what?" So I'm in defense mode because I didn't know what just happened. And she's like, "But you're wasting energy. Like, why would you start a dishwasher?" Because her lack of was she got reprimanded because of the money and energy and the lights on, right? And I'm like, wait, you asked me to do something. I'm thinking I'm going to get a pat on the back, and now I'm getting reprimanded because I followed instructions to make you happy, but you're mad at me. So see the disconnect?
Yeah.
What I
Yeah.
did, I got pissed. I had a quarter, and I go, here's the energy bill because I was an asshole. I was being an asshole. But so to see how something's so simple
Yeah.
because our lenses were different. Her lens came from a lack of because of how she grew up. My lens came of like, well, I need to people please because she needed this, so I heard her. So I thought I did something good, and yet we still combusted
Hmm.
because of our lenses being so different. What I could have done differently now that I'm a 52-year-old man was, so why does this bother you so much? Right? Why does this bother you? Yes, want to up some ass. But I needed to have curiosity to, as opposed to defense.
Right.
That what happens in relationships is you find out what your triggers are, knowing that you have to get through your triggers, not me finding out your triggers for you. I think that's why a lot of relationships don't work in this modern age because everybody's running from their triggers. He triggered me, as opposed to looking at those triggers as a way to come together and learn and heal together, as opposed to combusting and battling because you want to be right.
Yeah, and I wonder if too, I mean, with like triggers in general, that's one of the things that I've also found out too with like boundaries too, is like boundaries and triggers kind of go hand in hand, you know? Like if you get triggered, you might want to set a boundary naturally, right? Say, hey, this is what I need, yada yada. And then like the in a relationship that's symbiotic, right? That's helping each other, there ideally should be like, oh, you have a boundary, I should respect that boundary, but that's not how life is, right? And so like also not only just running away from it, but like, are you cool with that person not 100% respecting that too? Is like, it's not being disrespectful to the person in a way, but also understand like your trigger is your trigger, and that's your responsibility to work through it and have that conversation with your person so you can understand where they're coming from. Like, and I think that's an underlying factor that people expect nowadays is like, oh, I'm triggered. You have to coddle me. And I don't believe that personally. I think there can be a conversation about it and asking about those triggers so that you can both identify like how we can work together to make that easier, you know, and also make more conversation happen. But in the long run, like just to have it be coddled, I think is another underlying factor that happens in relationships in general.
Well, yeah, I think you brought up a great point. I think what we both want as men and women is we want to be accepted,
Right.
and part of that acceptance is vulnerability. But we're both so afraid of vulnerability because of what people have done to us, with us. and for us in that vulnerability. So now we have these walls up. So I think the truest form of love really is accepting yourself for who you are and loving that person the way they need to be loved. That's the key. Love them the way they need to be loved, not how you need to be loved. In other words, you may have needs, but they give them what they need as far as their form of love, and they'll give you what you need. But too
Right.
many times what we're doing is we're saying, well, what about me? What about we? What about me? And that scarcity and that way of limiting selfishness is why a lot of these relationships don't work, is because we're running from the love that wants to give it to us, because that vulnerability means we have to give ourselves in a little bit more. And a lot of us, especially my age, that women that are fucking 40 to 50, they've been burned so much that sometimes that scar tissue never goes away.
Mm.
And so people your age in their 20s, they haven't experienced as much. I'm not saying heartache hasn't been there, but there's still time to where you can still get through things more, because the scarring isn't as big, but it still takes massive courage, authenticity, and vulnerability to to entrust, not trust somebody, entrust someone with the love that you're seeking.
Mm. Yeah, and even going hand in hand with your depiction of love is like what they need is love too. There's also that fine line of like what is people pleasing in that versus actual love too, is like not giving yourself up
No,
for this.
I agree. So what I mean
Yeah.
by, let's say for example, you're a woman and you're saying, instead of shutting down, can you just kind of tell me what's bothering you, right? And so I'm going to say, so if I tell you what's bothering me, I'm going to ask that you just listen to me and hear me and not try to solve my problem.
Mhm.
That makes sense? So now we're both communicating what we need. So if one doesn't do what one asks, then that is a form of selfishness, because you're asking me, I'm giving you the boundary that I need, and you're still not listening to me. Well, now that's not going to work. So
Mhm.
what I mean by that is give people what they need based upon what they're also reciprocating back to you, which is what you need. But if, yeah,
Mhm.
you want to people please to the point where you're giving all in, it's like, here's what you need. Okay, here's what I need. And now we have this agreement that we can now dance together, as opposed to just me giving me everything you need.
Mhm. Right. Yeah, and it's tricky too because like you said, once ideally you should have like all this stuff figured out, right? But there's so there's so many different things that pop up that we don't even know. Like there's triggers that happen when you don't even think about it for years on end too. Like there's just so much like in the weeds that happens. I think that's what's so complicated about marriage now is there's already like the differences in the way we think in
Yeah.
terms of man and woman, and then you throw in the internet and social media, there's questions that come left, right, and center that people don't know, and it just makes it more convoluted. Like how, like, hey, like I heard this on the internet. I'm not receiving this from my current significant other. Well, then there's a problem that's just being initiated that wasn't actually a problem. It's just there's just comparison going on, and like there's this lack of trusting in what we already built. And so not only just like an infidelity, but just mere questions on what you're perceiving from the outside in has made it even more difficult to have those conversations and just trust that what you've already built is strong enough.
Well, I think social media has there's so many things wrong with it, and this is where the commitment really comes in. Like if you're really committed, I'm gonna say if you're a wife, I'm gonna put the wives on the spot first. I'll put them in on the spot in a minute. If you're a wife, because women are desirable, and you can post a selfie of yourself and get 10 DMs like this in a minute. Guys can't do that. But if someone's a wife, and maybe there's just a regular picture of you with your husband, or maybe with you by yourself, and somebody DMs you, a man DMs you and says, "You look beautiful," and you reply, "Thank you." In my opinion, you're wrong, because you're now inviting that person to a conversation that you don't know, stranger. as opposed to blocking them on the spot or not even acknowledging it. Same with men. If men are in committed relationships and they're husband material and they are endorsing DMs, you're wrong as well. And I think this is where the commitment really gets convoluted. Is, are you committed or are you interested? It goes back to my foundation of telling you about rebuilding yourself. You're either committed or you're not. And with the commitment comes very, very, not boundaries, bro, standards for yourself. When you're married, there's standards that you have to comply with. And interesting enough, 70 to 80% of the divorces right now and breakups are coming from women. It's a huge problem. Huge problem. I'm not saying that women are the problem. What I'm saying is there's a reason why women are doing this. Whatever the reasons are, this is where men and women have things different. Are you committed or are you interested in the relationship? That's the big, big difference that I see that's happening in this modern age.
Yeah, and the ability of choice is higher than ever too. Like how it's so difficult, but that's why we have to look in the mirror. I think that's what you're emphasizing too, is like what is important to you and are you going to go after it? If you need to pivot, you can pivot, but make sure that you understand what you're doing with that is like, I think since there's so many options, the consequences aren't seen as dire. And that's another difference too. Like it shouldn't be life or death, right? Just know that you are also like ripping away the confidence that you've already built. And I think that's the life or death part that is not being issued anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, what I've had to find with myself is I look at the last couple of relationships I've been in is, and I had a friend, this girlfriend of mine, really helped me through this because I was a dad and I was married for so long. Like we were together for like 17 years. Okay. You don't just get out of husband mode, dude. It doesn't go away. Regardless of how the marriage ended, I was still a husband. And with a husband comes a lot of responsibility and characteristics. Caregiver, responsible, protector, right? I did that with your mom and family. Maybe not the best of my ability, but my mode was that. And I just remember the past two relationships I've been in, I'm a husband, dude. And so I think that also what that means to me is some women aren't ready for that. They don't understand that the things that I come with, I'm all in, not all at once, but when I commit, I'm not committed to anybody else. Like I'm all in. And if someone's not ready for that, there'll be a lot of push and pulling. Now, this woman asked me, she's like, "Are you ever going to change that?" And I didn't even pause to go, "You know what? No, I'm a husband. I'll always be a husband because I've been I've been I love what I miss the most about being married, bro, is wearing my wedding ring because that was my it was my way of showing that I am married,
Honorable.
and that was an honor for me. And so for me, when I'm in a relationship, I am all in. Like I will provide for you. I will. I am that fucking knight in armor. Like I will come get you, and I will be there for you. But again, depending on where women are at right now, they're having a hard time understanding it because there's a lot of men that aren't chivalrous. They're not. They're plain. I have no desire, dude, anymore. No desire. So I think that's also understanding that unless you've been a husband, you don't know what I'm talking about. Like
Right.
there's a certain characteristic that I carry. Like I am yours, and I'm all in, and that means I'm your protector, provider, dutiful, like I'm honorable, all those things. And if a woman has never had that, they have no idea how to respond to it.
Yeah, and it's I guess the underlying question that I have too with that is how do you like for someone that is wanting to be a husband or a wife, right? How do you stop the desire to look for the always grass is greener side and then with the complacency that like the two polar opposites, right? Like how do you go from the always looking for something more versus the getting too comfortable?
Well, I would say A is who do you really want? Desire who you really want. So for me, devotion is really important to me, bro.
Mhm.
Beauty is really important to me. Commitment is really important to me. So you can be beautiful, but if you're seeking attention, I'm sorry, I'm not the right guy,
Right.
right? So, but if you're beautiful and you're desirable to me, and so there's characteristics that you have to know that you want for yourself, because you're not going to look at another person if the person in front of you is who you desire.
Mhm.
But what gets in the way is all these little other chinks in the armor, resentment, communication, all these little chinks in the armor. What get communication, like I said, all these things get in the way. So if you're not careful, these chinks in the armor now will push you away to where now you're desiring somebody else because what you're getting isn't fulfilling
Is
you.
there. Yeah.
This is why constant communication of checking in. How am I doing? What do you need from me? All these little things of forms of not people pleasing, but just checking in. Like what can we need to ship? I never did that when I was with your mom. I didn't do that with
Right.
the relationship after that. This last relationship that I did more of that. I did it differently. But yeah, to answer your question is human nature is it's okay to admire another individual because of beauty. That we're human beings. But there's a difference between desiring somebody else and just being attentive to somebody else. Huge difference.
Mhm. Right, and it's, that's again, it goes back to the commitment piece, like, what do you actually want? Like, just a short little dopamine, or do you want something that's actually memorable, something
Yes.
that you can trust? Because, again, if you're already doing that, how are you gonna trust that other person? There's always gonna be a little bit of doubt, like, "Oh, if I'm doing this, then you're accepting that behavior."
Yeah, I think that's where the slippery slope is what I've learned to let them go. Let them do what they
Yeah,
need to do. Like they're gonna do it. And
right.
you get to decide, is that behavior valid? There's no reason to fucking yell and scream and bitch and moan and
Mhm.
do all these text paragraphs. If that person, man or woman, isn't conducting themselves the way they need to present honor and respect for you, then you get to decide whether you want to be in that relationship or not.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
where, but again, when you're married, this is a little bit different. Okay. This is why we date, boyfriend, girlfriend. When you're
Mhm.
married, this is where people get it confused. Is you're committed now. You can't be halfway in. You got to, okay, what do I got to do to work on this to make this work?
Right.
Or viewing marriage as as nothing more than just the next step, as opposed to no, we're in it. Let's work on this.
Mhm. Right.
I failed to do as your father, as a man that was married, is I took the easy way out. I mean, really real with you.
Mhm.
Now, it was hard as fuck, but I had to took the easy way out because I wasn't right with myself, bro. I wasn't right with myself. So now that I am more right, I'm not there yet. I have a saying: when a man is right, his world becomes right. It's 100% true. Like I'm ready for that next phase of my life of having that marriage and that partnership. I wasn't when I was your father married to your mom.
Mm.
I understand the sanctity of what that really meant.
Mm. Well, I know you did your best, and so
Yeah.
from the outside point of view, you did what you thought was best at the time, right? And so for me, it's still, yeah, probably wasn't what I wanted at the time, and now we're here. We're here. So we got to make the best of it. We can cry about it, we can do whatever, but we're here now. We're learned,
Well,
and
I only say that just so you know. I've been, as you and I have grown our relationship, is I have to be accountable to myself, bro. Like I have to
right.
own my part of
Mhm.
it, and it's something I still deal with, dude. I still do it to this day. Like I broke our family up, and so why this is an important conversation is I don't want you to break your family up. Like all those
Yeah.
out, I want you to learn from the mistakes that I made, but understand that marriage isn't the next phase. Marriage is a lifetime commitment with
Mhm.
someone not that you love. Love isn't part of it, bro. It's you're committed to. Huge
Mhm.
fucking difference. Huge difference. Love and commitment
Right.
are completely different.
Yeah, because you get love when you're in a boyfriend girlfriend stage anyway, too, right?
Yeah. Well, and love is circumstantial.
Fluid.
It's
Yeah.
circumstantial. It's conditional.
Yeah.
Commitment is not conditional. It's like we're committed, dude.
Yeah.
No, man, I
That's
love the conversation, dude. This is a really, really good one. I'm really glad we got to talk about it.
well, I think it's just it's relatable to everyone too, right? Is it is purely circumstantial, which is not what people want to hear. I mean, I don't even want to hear it, but still, it's like it's so lucky
Yeah,
and nice to have, right? But that's not what makes the relationship, you know?
yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah, I love this conversation. I learned a little bit more about you in the sense of like how you went about like your little early childhood of like switching over from like boyhood to manhood with the marriage and even afterwards like how you just like conducted the dishwasher thing was funny. I thought you were gonna say that you and mom like you were the one that demanded the dishes because I just remember growing up, I would sprint downstairs if I didn't do my dishes and get it done right when she did. So I thought you were gonna say you were more strict on it than her. So that was funny. Um, and just like that, I think I've even learned more about like what it means to have marriage in my life and like the actual dedication and devotion
Yeah.
to that person and to the teamwork aspect because that's huge. I mean, I want to build a team. I want to build a partner that has that teamwork frame of mind. Because if you guys aren't in the same direction, how are you going to expect to win?
Yeah, man.
So,
What I love about you is you're a sponge. Think about this, bro. This is where the legacy is being built, man. Think about the conversations that we're having. I never had these with my dad. I never
right.
grandfather. No one ever, no one ever talked to me about like, don't go down the road I did. Like, there's a different route, but this is how you do it. And I think that's why it's beautiful that you and I can just do this and we can share this everybody on here. I had like 20 people on here.
Yeah.
And the last few that we've done, we've had like 1,000 people watching it. So people are watching. So I think it's really cool that we have two generations that are talking because now you have a different perspective. Not it doesn't need to be mine, but now you just have a different perspective
Mhm.
about how I view marriage. And then
Right.
you have a friend that's getting married. So now you have that way of conducting yourself. And now you have these pieces in your life to where you can elevate and now you can make your own decision as a man at where you want to be. And I think
Right.
where this is all going because now when you have your kids and your son and your daughters, you get to conduct yourself in your manner because now it's your space, it's your container.
Mhm. Yeah, and we gotta take it in and build it onto the next generation.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I love you. This was a great conversation, and I'm excited for next week's conversation. We talked a little bit about it tonight. And so what's up?
Oh, what we're gonna talk about.
You want to tell them? Okay, yeah, we're gonna talk about sobriety and how it's impacted your life.
Yeah.
I'll come up with some questions. We already discussed a little bit off the topic, so I'll hint at some of that as well. But we're gonna just talk about how it impacts the lifestyle in terms of alcohol, drugs, sex, vices that are all convoluted together. And we'll kind of shed some light on your transformation on just over 2 years without alcohol being a part of your life. And yeah, I'm ready for a conversation like that too, because more and more people my generation are referring away from alcohol. Yes, it's still an issue. So we want to address that portion and how we can do there's other ways to avoid what we're feeling and what we're dealing with. And one of the reasons is having conversations like this, like we're doing today and in future conversations, and also building a relationship between your family